When the chaos of popular culture makes your brain hurt, you really need belief in the form of a transfusion of analysis and humor. It's time for a POPeration. Join hosts Eric and Stacey as they dissect popular culture one bloody organ at a time. It's just what the doctor ordered.
Hello there. This is POPeration.
And I am Stacey.
I'm Eric.
And we're talking today about something that's very dear to a certain segment of our population.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Just see, I was trying to set you up there. I'm not sure.
It's June. It's Pride Month. And so we're celebrating
Who
gay
are we talking
pride
about?
by talking about some of our favorite divas. We love divas.
We do.
So,
we do love
so
divas.
the way that I define a diva, so tell me if this gels with you, Stacey, is a diva is a woman who is kind of primarily defined by being strong. She's a bold, brassy, tough as nails. Not all the time, but I mean, there's something about like a damsel in distress who just whines and cries and gets saved by a dude is not a diva.
Right. I think that I don't know if I can always say it's the strong, because there are some divas who that's not their reputation of being this strong, ballsy kind of person. But I feel like a diva is a diva. There is something iconic. They have a style of their own that is uniquely them, that is very much not that which is around them, that they developed on their own.
Okay.
And sometimes they are just style icons, but that is, I think, a huge part of it, in that, so they were then imitated. And they are known for that. And when the ones that we mention, there should be, for virtually every single one of them, an immediate reaction or immediate picture in one's mind when you say their name, because they were so iconic in their own style. Yeah. Sometimes their style was that brassy, ballsy dame, but sometimes it was so, they had such a good grasp of the persona that they portray.
Yeah. And some of the divas that we're going to talk about were not necessarily like super ballsy, brassy all the time. Sometimes they fall into the thing of life was really tough for them and they just kept on getting
They were survivors. I will say that. I will say all divas are survivors.
Yeah. So sometimes strength shows up in different ways. But here, let me give you an example of someone who I think is not a diva. I'm a huge fan of hers. I think she's wonderful. I think she's probably the best singer who has lived since we began recording music. Okay?
Wow.
And that is Ella Fitzgerald. I think she is probably the best singer that we've have on tape. I don't find her to be particularly a diva. She serves the song. And every time I saw old tapes of her performing, she just gets up on a stage, very unassuming, and just kind of is there to sing for the people. And thank you so much for coming. And she's really touched, and she's very humble. She sings beautifully, and then she kind of waves and steps off the stage.
Maybe part of being a diva is also being self-aware.
Perhaps.
That you are a diva, or you should be a diva, and that you're entitled to something. Maybe there's a sense of entitlement.
Yeah. Because I think Ella Fitzgerald just had a quiet life, but she's the best. I mean, really,
she's
I
amazing.
do believe she's the best singer that we've,
She may be.
And songwriters loved Ella because Gershwin and Cole Porter and Harold Arlen.
The hell out of a
she
song.
knew how to sing, but they always say that's the song the way I wrote it. She served the song. She never put her own spin on it to the extent that it was so clearly. And I can recognize Ella's voice. If you sing, if you play me an Ella song that I've never heard before, I'd be like, that's Ella Fitzgerald. But not because, whereas every drag queen in the world can do a Cher impersonation, and that it's Cher,
Yes.
So let's talk about, some of we'll go through a laundry list, if you will, of some divas that we're not going to get into real deep today.
No, this is just a part one.
Yes, we reserve the right to come back to this topic
again and again and again.
Every June, probably.
That's
And that allows, 10 years of Junes will allow us to get through some of the divas that we love and adore. One thing I noticed, though, when I was putting together this list, one way to just burrow yourself into the hearts of gay men everywhere is to drop your last name. Think about all the divas. Cher, Madonna, Rihanna, Beyonce, Adele. The list just goes on.
It does go on.
And even if you are talking about, somebody who does go by both names, when you say Liza, you know who you're talking about.
Correct.
There's one
Liza with a Z.
Yeah, exactly. Not Lisa with an S. Because Lisa with an S goes.
But again, you're talking about you have a list, and if you just go with the first name of this list.
Yeah.
And these aren't people who drop their last name.
So turn your list over. I'm just going to say the first name, and you tell me if you can come up with the last name. Right. Barbara.
Streisand.
Audra.
McDonald.
Audra McDonald. Patty.
LuPone.
Yep. Cheetah.
Rivera.
Dolly.
Barton.
Betty.
Davis.
Joan.
Crawford.
Bet.
Midler.
Tallulah.
Bankhead.
May.
West.
There you go. I mean, it's just, there it is.
Yeah. And that's what, again, there's, and it is different. Although I will say this, and again, we still aren't saying she's a diva, but Ella.
Yeah, if you say Ella, you know who you're talking about.
Yeah. But that's, so I just thought I'd throw that in there to be devil's advocate.
Sure. But if you're saying divas and you say Barbara, you're not talking about Barbara Cook.
No.
You're not talking about Barbara Stanwyck.
Probably not.
And Barbara Stanwyck might be a diva in her own kind of, but you're talking about Barbara Streisand. I mean, that's just, So lots and lots of, now I have a friend named Brett who's going to listen to this episode, and when he finds out that we're not talking about Barbara Streisand in depth, he's going to be very upset.
You may turn off your podcast now.
Because we're probably going to get to Barbara next June. But for today, we've come up with some divas that we want to discuss. And we think that these four are emblematic in a lot of ways of just the personification of diva, but in very different ways. We've pulled from different parts of history and
here's what I will say about these four. These are four of the divas who are very, 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 very likely to be part of a drag show.
Yes. I've seen them all.
I have seen them all as well.
I've seen them all.
Several in person. So I mean, that is who these are, and one reason they were chosen is for this month.
So we're moving backwards in history a little bit. We're starting with today's what I feel preeminent diva, particularly in the LGBT community, and that is Lady Gaga.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree.
So part of it is that, in the 2000s, she can do direct outreach to her LGBT fans. She can just talk to them directly, which you never have been able to do.
Brilliant. Yeah. She was able to figure out social media very early on in her career and used it to the best of her ability and amazingly. I think she's been a genius. And I tend to compare her to Madonna because I feel like she kind of took the mantle
a little bit
from Madonna and in certain respects. Madonna didn't have social media.
No.
So it's one of those where I'd love to see them, to have a comparison to
on a level playing
field because, Gaga's little monsters.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we didn't say, the definition of diva does not necessarily have to include talent, quite honestly. You can be kind of a style icon and not be the most talented, but Gaga has an incredible reservoir of talent. But what's amazing about her, to me, is that we didn't know that. For the first 2 years she was popular, she was singing very overproduced dance music that could have been auto-tuned.
Correct.
We now know that it wasn't.
Yeah, we now know
but it could have been.
And every year she tends to show us a different aspect.
Yes.
She's extraordinarily talented. Yes. I'm so impressed with her.
In multi-directions,
Yes.
But, so she came out with this, while she was still doing the dance music thing, she came out with Born This Way, which has the words lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender all in the song. I mean, this is something that when Madonna was trying to, because believe me, when a woman hits the gay community as a fan base, she has made bank. I mean, there are no fans more loyal.
That's true.
than, and they
Except
will
country.
stick with you.
Country doesn't too.
But then you get then Dolly hits the trifecta, right? Because she
gets
Dolly,
both. Exactly.
Yes. Because everyone in the country world loves her, but gay men, there is a particular spot in their heart for Dolly.
Right.
So she can act, but Gaga can actually just say, "Hey, I love you," and all the gay kids of the world go, "And we love you back." She calls her fans monsters, which is an interesting. In a way, she's kind of calling them freaks. She's kind of, but in a loving kind of way. But I think she's doing
that on purpose.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. She's really kind of doing outreach to those who feel freakish in their lives,
and
those
saying,
who might feel.
Is that how you feel? You're part of this club.
Yes, I love you, and you belong over here with us.
I want you. If you're a monster, I want you.
Yes,
that's what it is.
And for those, and everyone in every stage of their life, this is not just a thing for kids. Everyone craves that kind of belongingness, but when you're a teenager is when it's lacking more than in other places of your life, particularly awkward kids, particularly young closeted kids, or kids who struggle with depression, or anyone that kind of feels a little different. She's really made space.
Now I remember seeing, and this was a while ago, a really long while ago, and it was on MTV, and I never watched MTV. I haven't watched MTV for decades, but I was flipping channels, and again, this was at least 10 years ago probably, or whenever she first hit the scene. And it was still, I guess that Born This Way had just come out or something. So she was having, and I had just heard of her. I just learned who she, that she existed. And somebody was interviewing her. It was a very meh interview. And I turned it off going, I don't know whether she'll last or not, And that's why I am not in Hollywood. I cannot predict anything. But I think that she's learned since then how to do a good interview. But it was one of those where I didn't feel like she hadn't really defined who she was yet. Yeah. She was kind of trying to do this rebel person and against, everything that is considered normal, and it felt very cliched, and so I think that she has since, obviously, and it's very obvious to me, I have a great respect for her now. She's learned who she is, and I think, again, she wasn't a diva then. Now she is, because I think divas are comfortable in the skin of their persona.
Yeah. And what was interesting to me, so I knew who Gaga was almost immediately. Her first song, her first big hit was Just Dance. And I remember I was at our friend's, Faye and Bonnie's house, watching New Year's Rockin' Eve. That was on the TV.
Yeah.
I don't remember if Dick Clark was still
I'm sure
there,
he was still
Ryan.
there.
I think he was still there, but Ryan Seacrest was helping him along.
Yes.
And Gaga came on stage with some backup dancers and lip synced to Just Dance, and the choreography was weird, and her costume was weird.
Yes.
And Faye and Bonnie were not impressed in the least. And I thought, well, I like this song. And I said that, and they looked at me like, ugh, what have we done? How have we failed you? And, and we just kind of went on from there. And it was very it looked a little amateur hour. It did.
Right.
But it was the very, very, very beginning for her. And again, she could have just been some talentless person who just went nowhere. As we know now, she is not. The other neat thing about her.
That was a neat usage of the word neat.
I'm so square. Is she's like best friends with Tony Bennett.
That is bizarre.
Which is great.
So strange.
Oh, I love that. I do.
I think it's funny and amusing. I don't know if I love it, but I think it's so out there.
Well, I think it started because I think they have great respect for each other as performers. And, working in theater, as you and I both know, you do get a chance to work with people who are way outside of your generation.
Correct.
And I've developed friendships with people who have been cast as my parents. You just kind of develop this mutual respect. And so I think, at some point they probably said, hey, let's do he was probably doing one of his duet albums, and she came in to do a song. Now they've done an entire album of duets, just the two of them.
That you're exactly right on how that started, just because I would think that she would, she did have a lot of respect. And again, we didn't know what her voice could do.
No.
She knew.
No, she
knew. But the world didn't know.
But I remember the first time I found that out was she did Bad Romance, which is this overproduced dance track. But she was on YouTube just singing it in her studio with just a piano. And I was just like, what? Yeah. I mean, it really, wow. And, she had, before that, she was the chick who showed up to the award show in a dress made out of meat.
Yep.
Like that was her.
She went down, and that's the thing is that she could have gone down the Bjork
Yes. Yes.
And where Bjork is also a musician, but she's not known for that here in these Americas. She's known for the weird costumes.
Yeah.
And I say that word on purpose, costumes. And I think that was, when I saw that interview with Gaga, that first one, that's kind of where I thought she might go. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but she's actually really smart.
She is smart, and she's really talented, and it makes sense that she's this role model and impressive. So, yeah. So she deserves to be a diva.
Yeah, so she's diva number 1 out of 4 that we're going to talk about. When we come back, we're going to talk about 3 more divas. We're going to take a trip back to the 60s, 70s, 80s.
And then
with our next
before
one.
that too.
And then before that, and then even before that.
So we are going
to go all the way back to the 30s.
Back in time.
With these. But when we come back, we're gonna discuss 3 more divas that we just love.
You're listening to POPeration with Eric and Stacey. Take a deep breath. This may sting a little.
All right, we are back. POPeration. We're talking about divas today.
Diva!
And this is Divas Part 1, because I'm fairly sure at some point we'll be doing, this is Divas Part 25. But we're at Diva Part 1, so welcome.
And we're at our second diva.
Right, we're going over 4 that have a really strong tie to the LGBT community, and we thought that would be appropriate for this month. Granted, a lot of divas do.
Oh,
but we just chose 4.
I mean, to my mind, the part of the definition of diva is huge gay fan base. In fact, friends of mine will sit around, and if you're meeting gay men for the first time, a great icebreaker is, who's your diva?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Everyone has one that lives, and we're not talking about mine today.
Is there spirit diva?
Kind of. It's like a spirit animal.
What's your spirit diva?
My spirit diva is Liza Minnelli. And I'll tell you why. Because when I was a young little closet case... Make it quick, because she's not one of the 4. I know, she's not one of the 4. But when I was a young little closet case, I watched Cabaret over and over and over. And there's a gay storyline in there. Michael York's character kind of realizes that he's got a thing for Helmut Grieg. But Liza just lights up the screen in that, and she's still a lot more talented than people give her credit for. She's an EGOT. She's an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Award winner. Amazing amounts of talent.
I loved her as a comedian. She has some really good comic timing.
Yes.
And I will say this, and then we have to move on, is in Arrested Development. Oh, one of my favorite series ever. Holy crap, the woman was hysterical.
Yes, and always was. Cabaret, same thing.
Yes, just really good timing. Yeah. Really, really good
So anyway,
timing.
Liza's mine.
So Liza's your spirit.
But I do have a friend, if you asked him who his diva was, I'm fairly sure his answer would be Diana Ross.
And she is one of my faves. And I loved her forever. And now she was already a star, and she was already out of the Supremes by the time I was aware of her. She was in, again, I'm not telling probably anybody who's listening any kind of news. She's part of the Supremes.
Yep.
And then...
Spoiler,
she broke off from them and became
Well, the
a solo
Supremes
artist.
became Diana Ross and the Supremes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Barry Gordy said, well, let's just...
Some divas have a little bit of an ego.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So, anywho, she moved on and had a very nice career in disco, which is where I caught up with her. That was when I was listening, and possibly not my favorite disco song, but one of them is Muscles.
I want muscle.
And it was, and what's fun, it was the flip side back when there were singles, which some of you all know what those are. Those, 45s that you would listen to. It was the flip side. It was Muscles. And I loved that song. But I liked Diana. She's gorgeous.
Yeah.
She could sing. She sang all sorts. She could do the dance stuff. She could do...
Did she dance a lot? I mean,
dance songs.
Music.
I'm sorry.
Dance
no,
music.
She didn't
Okay.
dance.
She didn't dance. I was about to say. No,
she went from left to right.
She's
basically.
a park and bark. I mean, yeah. She's...
Okay, moving on. Park and bark. I don't even know how to... I don't. So... But yeah, no, I meant she did dance music, but she also, did the doo-wop stuff back with the Supremes,
and then
moved
Love.
on.
I mean, her and Lionel.
Then she did. Oh, that was a wonderful
Yeah.
one. She could, and that's the thing is, you wanted her singing your theme song.
Yeah.
One of the most famous, aside from "Endless Love," which was a duet, which with the famous movie song "Mahogany." Was one of her hugest hits because it came off of a movie that she was in with
Do
Billy
you know
D.
where you're going to?
Which always bothered me because the grammar's not good.
Well, but it works. It works. Now, Mahogany as a film.
This is your favorite film. I know this.
Oh God! It's hilarious.
I know it's
a
not.
great comedy.
I know it's not.
It's Diana Ross plays a brilliant young fashion designer. Of course she does. who then is no longer a designer. Now she's going to be a model. It's just, I mean, it's so...
No. It's cliched. You talk about cliche.
Oh my gosh. But, but fun to watch. I mean, now, if you're a fashion fan, if you like that, it is a fun movie. But, not to knock her film career, also an Oscar nominee for Lady Sings the Blues, in which she played Billie Holiday. She was in The Wiz. She was the Dorothy in the film version of The Wiz. Little long in the tooth to be playing Dorothy.
She was.
But it was Berry Gordy who loved her.
Correct. Here's my thing about her, and this is why she's, again, we talked about in Divas, very much likely to be in a drag show. But I think it's because there's also, in the whole diva idea, is bigger than life.
Yeah.
Comfortable in their own personas, but bigger than life. And maybe that's one of the things about Ella, in that she wasn't necessarily bigger than life. Her voice, yes, but not her persona.
No.
And when you look at these people, you look at Gaga, dear God, how could you get bigger than life than that?
Not much.
But Diana, her hair was bigger than life.
I was about to say, the first thing I think about is that, just waves and waves.
She was great friends with Michael Jackson. And I think they kind of fed off of and enabled each other to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But she was an entertainer, had grown up in the industry, and was very, very savvy. And I will tell you, one of my favorite songs of hers is from way back in the day called Love Child.
Okay, yeah, with the Supremes.
Love that song so much. Yeah, but they barely sing in it. It's all her.
Yeah.
But I love that song.
In fact, there were a couple of Diana Ross and the Supremes songs in which two women who were not the Supremes, Cindy Birdsong and Mary Wilson, didn't even sing on those, and they released them because they were barely there.
Yeah. There's another thing. Maybe Scandal also is a part of some of these divas. If we look at them, there's also like a tinge. But again, they're bigger than life, so Scandal's probably going to go there. But there's a lot of. Her life was very dramatic.
Yes.
And again, but she was comfortable with who she was. She put it out there and just kind of dared anyone.
Yeah. Now, I love Diana Ross, and I'm not saying this to anger anyone who loves her. Not the best voice in the entire... She tells a good story when she sings a song. So when she sings Endless Love, you get the point of the song, you get all the romance that's in there. But really, Flo Ballard was supposed to be the person to kind of lead the Supremes into... She had this voice, right? And Dreamgirls is loosely based on the Diana Ross and the Supremes story. Where the woman with the really, really big voice ends up getting drummed out of the group so that the pretty one can stand in front. Now, I think Diana is a more talented vocalist than Dreamgirls would have us believe she is.
Here's my thing about that, and I think that also part of the diva deal is that there's a personality. That bigger than life part means that there's a personality behind it, and Diana always had that. There's also that thing called presence that we talk about on stage. We talk about it in movies and television. It's not something that's learned. You kind of either have it or you don't. I think it can come later in life, but again, it's not anything that you can go learn about. It's not a skill you can acquire by working on it.
Certain performers are often described as being able to hold the audience in the palm of their hand, and Diana Ross is certainly one of those.
Correct.
Now, part of it is that now she's on stage so rarely that when she walks on stage, it's like, oh my God, it's Diana Ross, and that all of that.
She's a legend.
Diana Ross.
She's a legend, and that's that when you get to this age, Gaga will be a legend at some point as well too. And did you know, which I did not know until I was looking up a little bit, Ross was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Yes, I was aware of that.
Last year. And I kind of vaguely remember, but then I forgot it again, and then I remembered again. That's kind of my life these days. It's like forget stuff that I used to know, and it's all new to me, so it's very exciting. My life is very exciting. But I think Diana certainly should be part of the big diva lexicon.
Oh, absolutely.
She is
well, and then there's
amazing.
one thing that she did for the gay community in particular that I think really kind of cemented her status as a gay icon for the rest of her life. And it was I'm Coming Out.
Oh, yeah.
She sang
in
a
fact,
song.
you know what? That was on the flip side. That's exactly. It was I'm Coming Out, and on the flip side was Muscles.
Okay.
Which kind of makes sense
All
when
right.
we put it in the gay context, doesn't it?
Exactly. Because gay men like both of those things. But she used this phrase that was already being used in 1980. Coming out generally meant revealing a big secret about yourself. Now, the lyrics of her song were just, I'm coming into my own.
Correct.
And it was kind of an anthem
Female
about freedom
and
empowerment in general. But to put that phrase, come on, she's talking to her gay fans.
Right.
Somebody, or whoever wrote that song and gave it to her, said, this is going to be played in every gay disco across the country, and it's going to make us so much money. And it's kind of, I tell you what, when I first came out of the closet, and I was a late bloomer, I was about 25. When I went to a gay club the first year out of being out of the closet, and that song came on, and it was in the 90s, but it was 15 years old at that point, but everyone rushed out to the dance floor, everyone's singing along. It means something. So where Gaga can actually sing about gay people in her song, she did this oblique reference, but it was enough. Boy, we just loved it.
I also think that one thing that was really good is that she's black. In that,
is she really?
Okay, that wasn't meant to be a big educational statement. Smartass. But my point being that you want to have divas of all colors so that you get the most. If you're a diva, and I think that that was great at that time. We're talking about the 60s, it's civil rights and all this stuff, and here is this bigger, larger than life personality at the time, and then she got more flamboyant as she entertained.
And she was really one of the first to cross over because Motown obviously was an all black label.
Correct.
They sang a lot of music that white people did listen to.
Yes.
White people loved Motown.
Yes.
But then she really, when she became a solo artist, she kind of ventured into this disco territory that became very multiracial. I mean, you would hear, Chic right next to Casey and the Sunshine Band, followed immediately by Diana Ross, and it wasn't this segregated thing anymore. And she was really part of the whole beginning of bringing that together. And I feel like we've gone backwards a little bit in music. Actually, now black artists, it seems to be they're in that category of black artists again.
Yes,
probably much more so than they were in the late 70s.
I think it's because
80s.
of the different kinds of music. I think it's also because of how many places you can get music from.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of a difference. It was funneled through a certain number of places.
Now you just stream what you want to listen to, and there's a lot of options, and you can really live in your bubble again.
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that my other diva, going back in time even more to the 50s for the most part, and this is my favorite. I think she is underrated as an actress, but not underrated as a diva. I think, she gets her due. Marilyn Monroe.
I love Marilyn Monroe.
So do I.
And people think we're kidding
I know.
when we say that.
They're like, yeah. I know. And again, I think by this time, there have been a lot of biographies about her and that sort of thing. Most people will say, oh, yeah, I hear she's not as stupid as she played. So I don't know that the prevailing thought right now is that she was a dumb blonde, although there are probably some who still think so. But at the same time, I think she wasn't given the opportunities because of where she was, the time she was stuck in, to do more performances that would have possibly gotten her an Oscar, if you will, or acclaim. Let me put it that way. And she didn't do theater, so she didn't, she might have, had she lived longer and been in a different time period, frankly, she hopefully could have moved into maybe theater and had longevity there. But point being, bigger than life, she was, and this is why I wanted to differentiate in that she was comfortable and ballsy in her own persona skin, but not in her own self. She was extremely insecure as a person. Yeah. But the Marilyn Monroe facade that she had, she knew it left and right, knew how to turn her head, how to bang,
So there's this famous anecdote, right, where she's walking down the street with Susan Strasberg, was it?
Yeah.
And she said to Marilyn, it's so odd that no one recognizes you. And she said, oh, well, I'm not being Marilyn right now. And
Susan had no idea what that meant.
And what do you mean? She goes, watch. And she took her sunglasses off.
Said, do you want me to do it?
Yeah, do you want me to do Marilyn?
Yeah.
And so she took her sunglasses off. She just kind of, shook her head, and out came and just exuded this thing. And all of a sudden, she was surrounded by a mob of people.
She had done nothing else. She hadn't been wearing a hood or a hat or anything like that. She looked exactly the same, except she took her sunglasses off, shook her hair, and suddenly she was to the persona that had gotten her career. Yeah. But Susan Strasberg. In fact, I saw the old interview where she was talking. It was like Dick Cavett or something from forever ago, when she was talking about that story, and part of it was to give the example that that persona was not who Marilyn Monroe was most comfortable being. Yeah. And yet it had made her career.
But she could do it.
And she could do it.
Turn it on.
And she knew that it was her bread. That was what was it was. But I think it's that larger than life thing that really puts her in the diva. She also had entitlement. I mean, there are so many stories. She was hard to work with on the set. Now, again, there were a lot of issues. She had some psychological issues. She had some medication issues. But there was also, and I'm sure it all attributed and contributed to it. But again, there is the idea that I am Marilyn Monroe. So I will come to the set when I bloody well want to come to the set. Laurence Olivier. Yeah. So there. And I think that all, again, it's this big, larger than life that I think puts her firmly in there. But I will say this, and I won't belabor it, but I think she was an extraordinary actress. Oh, absolutely. And I love, like, River of No Return is probably, I like Bus Stop too. But River of No Return is my favorite Marilyn, because there are some scenes in there with Robert Mitchum. She was just amazing. And although I still tell you this, I also like Niagara. Okay. That's a fun one as well.
All right. I'll have to go back and rewatch those. It's been forever.
Yeah. Niagara was one of her first ones.
When I kind of think about my laundry list of Marilyn Monroe things, well, first of all, she's kind of best known today on the tragedy of Marilyn Monroe, despite her early death. The other tragedy,
remember Scandal?
Yes, which the other tragedy is that she's really best remembered nowadays for a very breathy rendition of "Happy Birthday" to JFK.
Yeah, she was not a singer.
And her skirt blowing up over a subway grate in the 7-year itch. That's how we know Marilyn Monroe today, and the platinum hair. I look to some of her a little bit more well-known. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Yes.
Some Like It Hot.
Yes.
Was she nominated for an Oscar for Some Like It Hot?
She was not, but the guys were.
Oh, well, she should have been. She should have been. Because she's lovely in that. And also, I liked The Prince and the Showgirl, that movie
I liked that movie. She was just,
with Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, that was Laurence Olivier.
With Laurence Olivier. The movie My Week with Marilyn, did you see that?
I did.
Where Michelle Williams played Marilyn Monroe, and I thought, who takes on the role of Marilyn Monroe? I thought she did a pretty good job.
She did. She did a fine job.
Pretty good job. But what I really liked about that movie is it showed, I think, why styles of acting were changing. She was a different kind of actor than Laurence Olivier was, and interestingly, and watch this movie if you think I'm wrong, she acts him off the screen. She is so much better and more charismatic than he is. While they're both trying to play these charismatic people, she just steals that movie. She had this it factor. And she had this genuineness about her where Laurence Olivier just came from this time where it was very studied.
He came from that period of stylized acting. If you see his version of Pride and Prejudice, and again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole very long, but it's very much a different one than the newest Pride and Prejudice, any that you've seen in the last several decades, because of the stylized acting. And I think you're correct. She was part of that bringing in of this more natural style of acting, and in her last completed film, Misfits, she showed that, and there was still a little bit of the stylization in there, and she was still every bit aware of what her persona was, and of course it was written for her.
Sure.
But there was this more real, gritty kind of thing that, again, had she lived, it would have been fun to see where she went with that.
Yeah.
But it's a testament to herself that even dying as early as she did, she's still a legend.
Oh, absolutely.
And she's still very much a diva and belongs in there.
Yeah.
So that's 3.
That's 3.
And we have one more, and it's a doozy. And we are going back even further in time.
The queen of all divas.
It probably is true.
And if you don't know who we're talking about, you're going to find out in just a moment.
Open wide. It's your prescribed dose of POPeration with Eric and Stacey.
And we are back. This is POPeration. I'm Eric.
I'm Stacey.
And the last diva that we're talking about
Because we're talking
today,
about divas to der.
We're talking about divas, and this is really the penultimate diva. This is just the ultimate diva. And that is Judy Garland.
Yes.
Beloved still by gay men all over the planet.
She was so good, she actually had a diva. Liza with a D.
She gave birth to another diva. She had too much diva energy.
She lives on. That's right.
Yeah. Well, and Lorna. I just said that to get that reaction. We're keeping this.
Yes, and Lorna Luft. Lorna doesn't deserve to go by only one name. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Lorna who?
That's so mean. Lorna with an N.
That's so mean. Oh no, now we're being mean. Okay. But anyway, Liza, love her.
Because Lorna's listening.
Judy Garland. Judy Garland, best known obviously for her turn in The Wizard of Oz in 1939, which we have discussed.
Yeah, she's another one that I'm going to put her with the Marilyn Monroe because she was, again, comfortable in her persona. Yeah. But off screen, she was a hot mess, frankly.
So when I say that divas are strong, I mean, a lot of divas are strong the way, Bette Midler is brassy.
And Betty Davis is
tough, you know, and so is Tallulah. Judy's strong in a different way. I still think she's a strong... She exudes strength in that.
In her persona, she was very strong.
In her persona, but also in her story, that when life knocked her down, she just got right back up again.
And maybe that's another part of the divaness is survival. Yeah. They're survivors.
Yeah. So a different kind of strength. Not the Bette Midler, Cher, Madonna variety, but a different kind of, she just kept right on plugging on. Her fans love her for a lot of different movies. I think most of them would say her best work was in A Star is Born, although sadly so many scenes have been ruined. By now you can only really watch the patched together version. We'll never really see that entire performance again. Meet Me in St. Louis, where she met Vincente Minnelli. And he shot her like a man in love. So, I mean, that's part of the reason why she's so gorgeous in that movie is because he was head over heels in love with her while he was shooting that whole thing. At Easter Parade, the Irving Berlin with Fred Astaire.
Oh, that was absolutely fun.
Where they ended up with the wrong people. Okay, in that movie, I'm still mad at Easter Parade because they ended up with the wrong people.
Yes.
She should have ended up with Peter Lawford, and he should have run off with Ann Miller, and everyone would have been happy. And instead, this dysfunctional relationship lives on, and it was odd.
It was weird.
It was predictable because they were the leads and they were above the title, but it should not have happened that way.
Agree.
Anyway, that was a side note. You're right. Unlike a lot of divas, her persona even was often very vulnerable and sweet. Now, in life, apparently, in addition to being... she had some problems with addiction.
Well, I mean, it started out, she was part of the Gum Sisters.
Yeah.
A trio of sisters who their mother was pushing them to sing and all that. And she was pulled out because she had the best voice, frankly, Frances Gum. And then, of course, what they did then is they changed her. They said, we're going to change your name, and you've got to get skinnier because you've got to compete with Shirley Temple. And that was, I think, one of the sources of her insecurity all her life. She was trying to be skinnier.
Uh-huh.
And that led to drugs and just... But I think that...
And when your name is Frances Gum and you live the rest of your life as Judy Garland, I mean, I think there is that...
Who are you?
Yeah.
Who are you? It's like
personality split, you know.
Marilyn Monroe was Norma Jean Baker, then suddenly they said, "No, sorry, that's not going to work. You're going to be Marilyn Monroe now."
Diana was Diane. Lady Gaga was Stephanie somebody. You know, I mean, it's interesting.
But I think Lady Gaga's different. She picked her own.
She did. I think Diana probably decided to go with Diana.
And decided to do that. But again, an A versus an E on the end of your name is not a big deal. I think that Judy and Marilyn, it was like, you're really, really talented. Now let's change everything about you. And that kind of screws you up for the rest of your life. You're going, who am I? Am I good enough to be this? And
Judy is this person that you are out there, as opposed to, you know, if she was always Frances Gum on the inside. Correct. If she even knew who Frances Gum was, because she'd been doing this since she was 3.
A child, correct.
You know, so, but apparently in life, and Liza Minnelli apparently will tell you stories about her mom's wicked sense of humor, which never really came out in any of her screen performances. Or, you know, you got a little bit of it if you see the footage of her live later on. She knew how to tell some stories.
Yes, and some interviews. Yes, definitely.
When she talked about how all the Munchkins were drunk on the set of The Wizard of Oz, you know, and you're like, that's a different side of Judy.
And there's a glint in her eye. She has a sparkle in her eye when she's talking about that. Yeah. Is it a hangover or I don't know? We're going to go with it was charm.
Yeah. But, you know, here's where she kind of is placed in gay history in particular. Is that, you know, she died 2 days before the Stonewall riots in New York City. And legend has it that when the cops raided this gay bar, as they were known to do throughout the 60s, and round up all of the gay men and the drag queens and put them in the back of the paddy wagon, and they were going to lose their jobs, and they were going to, all kinds of horrible things were going to happen to them. On this particular day, people were sitting around nursing their sorrows over the death of Judy Garland, and were not going to fucking take it. And when the cops came in and said, okay, we're rounding you up, they started throwing things at the place. And so in a lot of ways, Judy Garland is credited with the birth of the modern gay rights movement, because Stonewall, that lasted for a couple of days.
Right.
And all of a sudden, people across the country had this energy like, maybe this is our time. Maybe this is when we finally just stop being ashamed.
Right.
And stand up for our own human dignity, etc. And, you know, Judy said a couple of oblique things. I didn't have them, you know, written down. But, you know, later in life, she was asked about her gay following. And she just said, you know, not in any kind of, like, Gaga would have just absolutely said, of course I love my, you know. Judy just said, I love all my fans.
Right.
If they come to see me, I'm just so grateful.
Right.
You know, but she refused to say, oh, well, I think homosexuality is an abomination, and of course I wouldn't. And she could have, and her fans would have stuck with her at that time, because you felt like you had to say that. But she didn't. You know, she's still...
Although I think, yes, and I do think, and certainly, when, you know, she lived long enough to where you get into a part in your age where you're like, I'm going to say what I want to say.
Yeah.
But I also think that show business... At that time, there was a lot more inclusion there than there was in Middle America. And
I mean, I don't know that she's not like Elizabeth Taylor, who got to be best friends with Rock Hudson and Montgomery Clift and all of those people, but she certainly knew those folks.
Yes, and she knew that
they were gay.
She knew that others were gay. They were, you know, she was working with dancers and all of that, and so not to say that all dancers are gay, but you know what I'm saying, that she was working with a lot of people. And,
a lot of men in the chorus line are gay. Spoiler.
Well, I didn't want to prove that. So, but I think that, it didn't matter to her, but she wasn't going to alienate one way or the other. That was not what she's going to be. Certainly not at that point in her career.
And you know, so like, in a way, you know, like Gaga kind of, you know, reaches out to her monsters, she had something with her gay fans. But also the other thing was, later in life, I think what gay men really love about Judy is those old kind of the Judy Garland shows. She had a television program towards the end. She has this iconic duet with Barbra Streisand, where she's singing "Get Happy" slowed down, and Barbra Streisand is doing her already slowed down "Happy Days Are Here Again." Right. And Ethel Merman was on that show. Liza showed up on that show as a young girl.
Well, Judy was already a legend
at
that time. So it's I think if anybody got it an ask to be on Judy's show, they would have jumped at it.
And her voice was no longer made of velvet the way that it was when she done, but it was strong. And that's the thing. She was this
and she knew
skinny,
how to sell a song.
Small, frail woman with this huge voice. I mean, so you talk about larger than life. I think for Judy, it's the voice.
Yes.
It's an iconic voice. No one sounds like Judy Garland.
No.
I don't know how you would even try to have that
I think
kind of...
you don't.
Yeah.
I think...
But, you know, people in life have had to play her.
But you're never... No, you're not. I mean, even Liza...
No, different kind of super strong voice.
Correct.
But
correct.
You know,
I mean, it's you don't... Why go after that?
Yeah.
Why
exactly.
suffer the humiliation?
But that's kind of the larger than life perspective. There is this amazing voice out of this little itty bitty, and towards the end of her life, you could see that she was little itty bitty.
She was teeny tiny.
You know, yes, she was.
And got teeny tinier as things progressed and pills were popped. But I think that when you look at what is in common, it is that survivor. It is that bigger than life. It is that comfort in whether it's either in their own self, like I think Gaga's comfortable in her own self, or in their persona, the persona that was created or they created themselves, which I think Diana had a bigger hand creating hers than I do Judy and Marilyn. I think they had a lot more help. This is who you're going to be, ma'am. I think that all of that really puts them into that thing to be admired and to be looked up to, but it's that larger than life thing that really also leans them into being able to be done in drag.
Yeah,
so well.
It's easy to parody.
How would you
that.
do Ella Fitzgerald in drag?
You couldn't. You couldn't.
And so,
although one of the most popular drag queens in DC goes by the moniker Ella Fitzgerald.
Okay.
Which I'm just going to go on the record and say that bothers me. I like drag names that are clever.
I do too. I'll be honest. That to me is just like I might as well go out there and say, and I'm John Jones. I find that
Angelina
boring.
Jolie. Like, who cares?
Yeah, and I think that I think it should be clever. I agree, but that's a whole other story.
But apparently she's a DC legend and everyone loves her. And
okay.
I don't know her personally,
fine.
so don't say a word about her. But anyway, final diagnosis on our divas. Why do we, and gay men especially, I'll maybe talk to that a little bit more, but why do we love these divas?
I think it's like anybody that we look up to, any role model, there is something that they have or they personify that we can relate to. I think we talked about the larger than life, but we also talked about the survivorness of them all. And I think that can relate, people relate to vulnerabilities because we all have them. So you sit there and you relate to the person because you feel like they've gone through what you've gone through or something like that, and they survived it. But then you go to the next step and you say, don't they have a great life now? So there's that, I would like to be like them, but also they were like me.
Yeah.
And so there's a connection there. And then there's the bigger than life thing in that they're just so big, it just takes up all the space. That makes no sense. I realize that, but there's just something about, like Marilyn Monroe is just so gorgeous. Diana Ross was so beautiful and graceful, and Judy's voice was it was just that next level.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, it was a lovely voice. It was that next level. And Gaga's voice is so amazing. It's just bigger than life that you just want to, it's a hope.
Yeah.
You want that to be real.
Side note on that, though, is that, some divas are not the prettiest girl on the block. You don't. It's classic beauty.
Judy wasn't the prettiest one on the block.
Well, and you think about people.
Gaga is not.
Barbara Streisand.
Correct.
Betty Davis.
But
all
there's
of these.
Something that is bigger.
But they carried themselves like beautiful people.
But it's that confidence. Yeah. It's that comfort in either their own persona or their own skin. Again, I think Betty was comfortable in both her persona and her skin. But but Bette Midler is very comfortable in her skin.
Yes.
And as I said, for these four that we talked about, there's a comfort, there's this big loving the bigness of it.
Yeah.
And so as a straight woman, I like them because of whatever they bring to the table is so much bigger than just normal.
Yeah. So from the gay perspective, I think what I have a theory about divas that I'll share with you. I think that when little gay boys realize that they're different. And their difference is not associated with butch masculinity. They have a really hard time living up to this masculine ideal in a lot of ways. Some don't. Many of us did. I think that when we see examples where somebody is the opposite of masculine, but really, really strong, there's a certain amount of hope there. That we can find our way as well. Because, extreme femininity is that damsel in distress thing. And what a lot of divas have in common is they bust out of that real quick. They're like, no, I'm not going to be that
I'm gonna
girl.
and this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to disagree. That, to me, is not extreme femininity. That's extreme vulnerability. But I'm not going to say that.
No, and I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying, but if you look at gender roles, the way they are, the man's supposed to be the hero, and the woman's going to, she's going to be a little frail and helpless, and he's going to come rescue her. But here you have these women who are incredibly feminine, dresses, jewels, spangles, eyelashes, hair, the whole thing, super duper strong, in whatever way that shows up, in theory, whether they're a survivor or whether or not they're just kind of big and brassy. And I think that for a lot of gay boys, that's just really comforting to see that there's a path to strength and to survival and to making it through to see the next day that doesn't have to do with being the butchest person you've ever met in your entire life. And I think that there's this psychological connection there with all of these women. And it doesn't help that, many of them will be very open about the fact that they love us. And when we need to be loved, we love them right back.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our last word on Divas.
Yeah.
Happy Pride.
You've been listening to POPeration with Eric and Stacey. Check out our website at POPerationRoom.com for links to our blog and other extras. Don't forget to subscribe to POPeration via iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, and other podcast locations. You can also follow @POPeration Room on Facebook and Twitter. Music provided by PurplePlanet.com.